My name is Emily Carter, and the day my world shattered began like any other. I was 17, a senior in high school with big dreams, a heart too soft, and a secret that would change everything. That morning, the Indiana sky stretched wide and endless over the golden fields behind our school. The halls buzzed with senior year chatter, prom plans, college applications, who got into where. My best friend Hannah teased me for doodling hearts in my notebook again. "Let me guess," she said, leaning over my desk. "Owen Barnes." I laughed, cheeks warming. "You say his name like it's a crime." She rolled her eyes. "Star quarterback, dimples for days. He's trouble, Em." Trouble. Maybe. But when Owen smiled at me, the world felt like it finally made sense. We'd met sophomore year. He'd sat behind me in history class, whispering jokes that made me snort laugh until the teacher threatened detention. By junior year, we were inseparable. He'd drive me home in his old red truck, country music humming low from the radio, our hands brushing on the gear shift. He'd call me his girl, even though we were still just kids pretending to be grown. We'd talk about everything: college, moving out, maybe starting a business together. He wanted to study sports medicine. I dreamed of becoming a teacher. It felt like the kind of love that could outrun time. But love, I learned, doesn't always survive reality. The day I told him I was pregnant, the autumn air smelled of rain and cut grass. We sat in his truck behind the bleachers, the same place we'd shared our first kiss 2 years before. My hands trembled as I clutched the folded test results in my lap. "Owen," I started, my throat tight. I need to tell you something." He turned down the radio, his smile soft. "You're scaring me, Em. What is it?" I stared at the rain sliding down the window like tiny rivers. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed felt endless. The hum of the engine filled the space between us. His smile faltered, then vanished. "You're sure?" I nodded, barely breathing. He leaned back, hands gripping the steering wheel. How could this happen?" "We were careful." "Not careful enough," I whispered. "But it's real, Owen. I went to the doctor. It's real." He stared straight ahead, jaw tight. "Okay, so what do we do?" "I don't know. I just know I can't." My voice cracked. "I can't get rid of it." His head whipped toward me, eyes wide. "Em, you're 17. You can't have a baby. You'll lose everything: college, your parents, everything." Tears welled up. "I thought you'd say we'd figure it out." But he didn't. Instead, he shoved his hands through his hair and muttered, "I need time." Then he started the engine. "Owen!" He didn't answer. He just drove me home, both of us silent, the sound of rain drumming harder on the roof. When he pulled up in front of my house, he didn't look at me. "I'll call you," he said. He never did. By the third day, his phone went straight to voicemail. By the fourth, his friends avoided me in the halls. By the fifth, he was gone, transferred out mid-semester. I remember standing in the empty hallway outside his locker, the echo of laughter fading as the last bell rang. Inside, his things were gone, not even a note. That was the day I learned silence could be louder than any goodbye. When I told my parents, it was a Tuesday. My mom was at the kitchen counter kneading dough for dinner rolls, and my dad was reading the local paper, glasses perched low on his nose. The smell of yeast and cinnamon filled the air, a scent that used to mean home. "Mom," I said softly. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you." They looked up, expectant. I tried to speak, but the words stuck. Finally, I blurted, "I'm pregnant." The room froze. My mother's hands went still, dough clinging to her fingers. My father's face went from confusion to disbelief to rage. "Please say you're joking," he said, his voice low. "I wish I was." "Who?" he demanded. "Owen," I whispered. "But he's gone." "Gone." My dad slammed the paper down. "Gone where?" "I don't know. He won't answer my calls." He pushed back his chair so hard it screeched against the tile. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined your life." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Emily, how could you be so careless? You're 17. I know, I said, choking on the words, but I can't change it now. You'll end it, my father said flatly. I can't. His voice rose sharp as breaking glass. Then you can't stay here. Paul, my mother gasped. She's our daughter. He turned on her. She made her choice. Let her live with it. And just like that, my home, the place I'd grown up, the walls that had heard my laughter, turned cold. That night, I packed a small duffel bag, a few clothes, my old journal, and the photo of Owen and me from last summer's county fair. I stood at my bedroom window looking out at the porch light glowing like a ghost and whispered goodbye to the life I thought I'd have. The bus station smelled of diesel and rain. My hands shook as I dropped my last crumpled dollar into the ticket machine. One-way ticket to Springfield, 2 hours away. I didn't know what waited for me there, only that my grandmother Ruth lived in that little town. She was the only one who'd ever told me, you can always come to me no matter what. As the bus pulled away, the night swallowed everything behind me. My reflection in the window was pale and trembling, a girl trying to look brave, while the world she knew vanished in the dark. I pressed my hand against the glass and whispered, "Please, God, don't let this be the end." The bus rolled into Springfield just after dawn, fog curling over the fields like breath on glass. I stepped off with my duffel slung over one shoulder, my stomach churning from nerves and morning sickness. The station was nearly empty, just a janitor sweeping floors and an old man snoring in the corner. I called Ruth from the payphone, praying she'd still remember the promise she'd made when I was little. "You ever need me, baby, you call." It rang twice before her gravelly voice answered. "Hello. Grandma, it's me, it's Emily." A pause. "Emily, honey, what's wrong?" I need somewhere to stay. Just for a while." Another pause, softer this time. "You come on over. You know where the spare key is. I'll put the kettle on." Ruth's farmhouse sat on the edge of a long gravel road, the kind where the horizon looked endless and the wind carried the scent of soil and hay. She lived alone since Grandpa died, but her house always felt alive. Creaky floors, mismatched curtains, a wood-burning stove humming in the corner. When I arrived, Ruth opened the door before I could knock. She stood there in her flannel robe and slippers, her silver hair pulled back in a braid. Her sharp eyes softened the moment she saw me. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into her arms. "What's happened to you?" I broke then, right there on her porch, the words tumbling out between sobs. About Owen, about my parents, about how I had nowhere else to go. She held me until the crying stopped, then guided me inside and set a steaming mug of chamomile tea in front of me. "You'll stay here," she said firmly. "We'll figure the rest out later." "But Grandma—" "No buts," she said, her voice gentle but unyielding. "Your family. That means something." The first few weeks were a blur of nausea, exhaustion, and fear. Ruth took me to the local clinic where a nurse with kind eyes confirmed what I already knew. I was about 2 months along. When she placed the ultrasound wand on my stomach, a faint thump filled the room. Tiny, rhythmic. "That's the heartbeat," the nurse said softly. I couldn't breathe for a second. That sound, fragile but steady, was the first time I believed this wasn't just a mistake. It was a life. Ruth squeezed my hand. "Looks like you've got yourself a fighter." Ruth didn't treat me like a burden. She put me to work. "Idle hands make sad hearts," she said, handing me a basket of laundry or a rake for the garden. "You keep busy, you'll stay strong." So I did. I helped with chores, learned to bake her famous peach pie, and spent evenings watching old westerns while knitting baby socks I wasn't sure I'd ever have the courage to use. Sometimes late at night, I'd lie awake in the small guest room upstairs listening to the crickets sing outside the window. My hands would rest on my stomach, feeling the faintest flutter, and I'd whisper, "We're gonna be okay. I promise." But promises feel heavier in the dark. One afternoon, Ruth drove me into town for groceries. The clerk behind the counter, Mrs. Peterson, gave me that look the one small towns specialize in. Pity mixed with judgment. "Didn't know Paul's girl was back in town," she said, scanning the items. "And expecting I see. I felt my cheeks burn. Ruth, without missing a beat, smiled sweetly and said, "Yep, and she's doing just fine. You know, some folks raise crops, others raise strong women." Mrs. Peterson didn't say another word. Back in the truck, I exhaled shakily. "Thanks." Ruth smirked. "Don't thank me, honey. Just remember, never let other people write your story." By spring, my belly had rounded and the baby kicked strong enough to make me gasp. Ruth made sure I ate well rested and stayed busy. But every now and then, I caught her watching me with that quiet, knowing expression. "You're thinking about him again," she'd say. I'd look away, sometimes. "You still love him?" A long silence. "Then I think I love who I thought he was." She nodded. "That's the hardest part. Learning the difference." As the months rolled on, my parents never called. Not once. Ruth sent them a letter, didn't tell me what it said, but a week later, a small envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a check and a note in my mother's handwriting. "I hope you're safe. We're not ready to talk yet. Mom." It wasn't love, but it was something. Ruth handed me the envelope and said simply, "Sometimes love's clumsy like that." When summer came, the fields turned gold and the air shimmered with heat. I was 8 months along, moving slower but feeling stronger than I ever had. Ruth's farmhouse became my world. We'd sit on the porch at sunset sipping lemonade while the cicadas sang. "You've got your mama's heart," Ruth said one evening, her voice low and warm. "Too big for your own good. But you've got my spine too, thank God." I laughed. "Guess that's a dangerous mix." She smiled, the best kind. The night I went into labor, a storm rolled over the plains. Lightning flashed through the window and the air smelled like wet earth. Ruth stayed by my side, calm as ever, while the doctor from town hurried in his shoes, muddy from the rain. Hours blurred together until at 3:22 a.m., a cry filled the room, sharp, fierce, alive. The doctor smiled. "It's a boy." Ruth squeezed my hand. "You did it, sweetheart." When they placed him on my chest, I looked down at his tiny face, eyes shut tight, fists balled up like he was ready to fight the world, and whispered, "Eli. His name's Eli." Ruth smiled through her tears. "Strong name. Fits him." I traced his little fingers and thought, maybe we'll be okay. The weeks after Eli's birth were a blur of sleepless nights. Warm bottles and soft lullabies whispered into the dark. I'd never known exhaustion could live so deep in my bones, or that love could too. Ruth said motherhood was a kind of holy madness. I didn't understand it at first, but every time Eli wrapped his tiny hand around my finger, I knew what she meant. He was small, but fierce lungs, strong eyes, bright a will that reminded me of Ruth herself. Sometimes, in those quiet moments before dawn, I'd watch him sleep and whisper, "You're my reason, baby. You're why I get up again." Money was tight. Ruth's savings stretched only so far, and though she never complained, I saw the worry in her eyes when she balanced her checkbook at the kitchen table. So when Eli was 3 months old, I started looking for work. The diner on Main Street needed a waitress for the breakfast shift, and the owner, a broad-shouldered woman named Darlene, took one look at me, tired eyes, hopeful smile, and said, "You show up on time, you're hired." So I did. Every morning I'd leave the house before sunrise. Ruth would take Eli, humming him back to sleep while I biked the 2 miles into town. The smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee clung to my uniform, but I didn't mind. The regulars, farmers, mechanics, truckers all knew me by the end of the first month. They'd call out morning sunshine when I came through the door, and sometimes they'd slip a little extra in the tip jar when they saw the dark circles under my eyes. Ruth always said the town had its share of gossip, but twice as much kindness if you knew where to look. Evenings belonged to Eli. I'd come home bone-tired, but one smile from him made the whole world feel softer. We had a routine bath bottle bedtime stories. I'd rock him in the old chair by the window while Ruth sat knitting nearby. "He's gonna grow up good," she'd say. "You'll see." "I just hope I don't mess him up," I'd whisper. Ruth chuckled. "Honey, all parents mess up. The good ones learn and keep loving anyway. The years passed in steady rhythm. Eli learned to crawl, then walk. His first word was truck, which Ruth found hilarious. By the time he turned 5, I'd saved enough to take online night classes in accounting. I'd always been good with numbers, they made sense in ways people didn't. Darlene let me use the office computer after closing time, and sometimes she'd watch Eli while I studied. Single moms are superheroes, she'd say, pouring me another cup of coffee. You just don't get the capes. I'd laugh, but inside I carried that like a medal. When Eli started kindergarten, Ruth cried harder than I did. She stood on the porch waving as the school bus rumbled away, wiping her cheeks with her apron. I can't believe he's old enough already, she sniffled. Me neither, I said. Feels like I blinked. That first afternoon when Eli came home, he burst through the door shouting, "Mama, I made a friend." I dropped to my knees. You did? What's his name? Tyler. He says his daddy drives a tractor and knows how to fix everything. Ruth grinned from the kitchen. Sounds like you picked the right friend, kiddo. It was a small thing, but that day I felt like we were finally part of something again, a normal life, a normal rhythm. Still, sometimes when the nights grew quiet and Eli was asleep, I'd find myself scrolling through social media on Ruth's old tablet, typing Owen's name into the search bar. Most times nothing new came up. A few old photos from high school, him at prom, him in his football jersey, that grin I used to love. Once, years later, I found a post that said he'd moved to Ohio working for a construction company. No family listed, no wife. I stared at the screen for a long time, then turned it off. Some ghosts didn't need resurrecting. By the time I turned 27, Eli was 8 and Ruth's health started to dip. Her doctor said she needed to slow down, but Ruth wasn't the slowing down type. I'll rest when the good Lord says so, she told him. But I saw it, the way she'd rub her chest after climbing the stairs or pause mid-sentence to catch her breath. So I started picking up extra shifts at the diner, and on weekends I helped neighbors with bookkeeping, small farms, local stores. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept Ruth's medicine cabinet full. One night after closing the diner, I came home to find Ruth sitting on the porch swing, Eli curled up beside her, fast asleep. The porch light flickered, casting soft gold across her weathered face. You look tired, I said, setting down my purse. She smiled faintly. Been tired since 1959 sugar. I laughed and sank beside her. You ever regret staying here all your life? Ruth looked out over the fields, the crickets humming low. Not once. Some people chase the world. Others build a piece of it worth staying for. I chose the second. I followed her gaze to Eli, his little chest rising and falling under the blanket. I guess I did too. Ruth's hand found mine. You didn't just build a life, Emily. You built a legacy. The words landed deep, not just a compliment, but a truth I hadn't let myself believe. The next morning, she was up before dawn, frying bacon and humming to herself. When I teased her for ignoring the doctor's orders, she winked. If I'm gonna go, I'll go full and happy. She didn't go for another 10 years. But I didn't know then how much I'd come to cherish that morning, her laughter, the smell of coffee, the sunlight breaking over the cornfields like a promise kept. 18 years passes slower than you think, and then all at once. By the time Eli turned 10, we'd built something steady, almost ordinary. The farmhouse was still our home, though Ruth's health had grown fragile. I'd finished my accounting degree online one late night after another and landed a full-time job at a local finance firm in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. Numbers made sense. They stayed where you put them, unlike people. Eli grew up fast too. He had Ruth's quick wit, my stubborn streak, and an endless curiosity about how things worked. By 13, he could fix the lawnmower better than I could. When he wasn't tinkering, he was helping Ruth in the garden. They were a pair, her giving orders, him pretending not to listen, but doing everything exactly her way anyway. Sometimes I'd stand at the kitchen sink watching them through the window, feeling the strangest mix of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for the life we'd built, fear that the peace we'd found might not last. because deep down I knew nothing gold stays forever. Ruth's health started to slip more seriously when Eli entered high school. A mild stroke one winter morning shook us both. She recovered enough to sit up and fuss about hospital food being an insult to God's creatures, but I saw how fragile she'd become. That spring I moved my small accounting setup home so I could be near her and Eli. My firm allowed me to work remotely, not common in a town like ours, but my boss said, "You're too good with numbers to lose Emily. We'll make it work." It wasn't the life I'd imagined at 17, but it was one I was proud of. We had routine laughter, stability, things that once felt impossible. And still some nights I'd wake from dreams about Owen, or rather, about the girl who used to love him. Dreams where he hadn't left, where my parents hadn't slammed the door, where I wasn't 17 and terrified. But every time I looked at Eli, those dreams faded. He was proof that the worst thing that ever happened to me had also given me the best. When Eli turned 16, Ruth insisted on teaching him to drive her old pickup truck. "If I survived teaching your mama how to drive stick, I can handle you," she told him. He laughed, but I stood on the porch clutching the railing, praying that old Ford didn't fall apart mid-lesson. When they came back an hour later, Ruth was grinning like a fool, and Eli was shaking his head. "She made me parallel park on the county road, Mom." Ruth winked. "And you didn't hit a single mailbox. That's progress." That night we had dinner on the porch, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and Ruth's famous biscuits. Fireflies blinked in the fields, and for the first time in a long while I felt settled. "Ruth," I said softly, watching her sip her iced tea, "thank you for everything." She smiled without looking up. "You don't thank family, sugar. You just love 'em back." A year later she passed quietly in her sleep. The morning light had barely touched the curtains when I found her hands folded, face peaceful, as though she'd just decided she was done being tired. Eli was 17, I was 35. We buried her under the oak tree out back beside Grandpa. Half the town showed up, people she'd helped, fed, or just loved too hard to let go. The preacher said she lived a simple life. But I didn't think it was simple at all. Ruth had been the root that held us steady when the world tried to blow us away. After the service, Eli slipped his hand into mine. "She'd hate this," he said softly. "All the fuss." "Yeah," I said, smiling through tears. "But she earned it." The house felt too quiet after that. The ticking clock in the kitchen became deafening, and even the wind outside seemed lonelier. Eli tried to stay strong for me, I think. He threw himself into schoolwork, sports, anything to fill the silence. I threw myself into work. One night I found him in Ruth's old room, sitting on her bed with a framed photo of the three of us. "She's gone, isn't she?" he said. I nodded, sitting beside him. "Yeah. But you know what she'd say right now?" He smiled faintly. "That we'd better quit moping and fix something." I laughed. "Exactly." The next few years blurred together: graduations, birthdays, small victories. Eli earned a scholarship to Purdue, majoring in mechanical engineering. When the acceptance letter came, I cried so hard he thought something was wrong. "Mom," he said, hugging me tight, "you did this. You made it happen." "No, baby," I whispered, "you did." But deep down, I knew we both had. Ruth's lessons had carried through both of us. I remember standing at his graduation party under the oak tree, watching him talk with his friends, tall and sure and kind. I thought, he's the proof we made it through. By the time Eli packed for college, I'd finally saved enough to open my own accounting business, a small office downtown above the florist shop. The sign out front read, "Harper and Copiter Accounting Services," a nod to Ruth's maiden name. Business was steady. Word spread fast in small towns, and soon I had more clients than I could handle: local farmers, shop owners, even the mayor's office. One crisp October morning, as I brewed my coffee and reviewed a stack of new inquiries, my assistant Jenna knocked on the door. "New client request," she said, grinning. "Big one. Construction firm expanding regionally. You'll want to take this." "Perfect," I said, scanning the form. My smile froze halfway through the page. At the bottom, under the company logo, was a familiar name in neat black ink. Jake Miller, Regional Manager. My heart stuttered. I hadn't thought about him in years, but the sound of that name still hit like a gust of cold air. Owen Barnes, the boy who left me, had changed his name. The coffee grew cold in my hand as the past came rushing back, alive and sharp as ever. Ruth's voice echoed faintly in my head. "Don't shrink, Emily. Never again." So I straightened my shoulders, looked Jenna dead in the eye, and said, "Schedule the meeting." The following Tuesday morning dawned, cool and bright sunlight cutting across my office floor in pale golden stripes. I sat behind my desk, the nameplate reading Emily Carter, CPA, trying to convince myself this was just another meeting. But my hands wouldn't stop trembling. 18 years. It had been 18 years since Owen Barnes vanished from my life, and now he was coming back as Jake Miller, Regional Manager of a construction firm. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't 17, scared or heartbroken. I was 35, a business owner, a mother to a son heading off to college. Still, when Jenna buzzed through the intercom and said, "Your 10 a.m. is here," I had to steady my breath before answering, "Send him in." He looked different but not unrecognizable. His hair was shorter, flecked with gray at the temples. His jaw was stronger, his shoulders broader. But those eyes, the same soft hazel that once looked at me like I was the only person in the world, froze me for a second. He stopped in the doorway. "Emily." I nodded, keeping my voice even. "Mr. Miller, please have a seat." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt thick with everything unsaid. Finally, he cleared his throat. "It's been a long time." I smiled politely. 18 years, give or take. He let out a breathy laugh, the sound awkward and hollow. "You look... well, I am." He nodded, glancing around the office. "You've done good for yourself." "I've worked hard," I replied, the words steady. The silence that followed stretched too long, so I opened the folder in front of me and shifted into professional mode. "You're looking for full-service accounting support for your expansion, correct?" "Yes," he said quickly, as if grateful for the lifeline. "We're opening a new branch in the region. Need help with payroll setup, vendor management, compliance, the works." "I can handle that," I said. "I'll put together a proposal." He nodded again, fiddling with his pen. "Emily, I cut him off gently. "Business first, Mr. Miller. Personal matters later if they're still relevant." His mouth tightened. "Right, of course." We finished the meeting in 30 minutes. Every word felt mechanical, every polite exchange rehearsed. I handed him a summary sheet, and when our fingers brushed, it felt like touching a ghost. When he stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. "You've built a good life," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you." I didn't look up. "Thank you. I built it without you." He didn't respond. The door closed softly behind him, and I sat in the silence that followed, my pulse echoing like a drumbeat. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet with Eli gone to college, and the memories I'd locked away for nearly 2 decades started to slip through the cracks. I made tea and sat on the porch, the night air cool against my skin. Somewhere out there, the boy who once broke my heart was sleeping under the same sky, now a man carrying his own ghosts. Part of me wanted to hate him all over again. Another part, the tired older part, just felt curious. Why now? Why here? The next morning, I found an envelope on my desk. No return address, just my name in a familiar handwriting I hadn't seen since high school. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Emily, I didn't know it was you when I reached out. When I saw your name on the client list, I almost walked away, but I couldn't. I owe you an apology, even if it's 18 years late. I left because I was scared. My father found out before I could tell him. He packed us up and moved overnight. I told myself I'd reach out when I got my life together, but every year that passed made it harder to face what I did. There's not a day I don't regret it. If you'll let me, I'd like to meet your son. Not to disrupt your life, just to see him once. To tell him the truth myself." Jake. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. Meet my son. Eli was 18 now, bright, capable, fiercely protective of me. I'd always told him the truth, at least the version I could manage, that his father left before he was born, that some people aren't ready for love when it comes. But I'd never told him the name. That evening, I drove out to Ruth's oak tree. The sunset spilled gold across the field, and the wind whispered through the leaves. I wish you were here, Ruth, I said quietly. You'd know what to tell me. In my head, I could almost hear her voice. You can't protect a boy from the truth forever, sugar. But you can show him what strength looks like when it comes knocking. She'd be right. She usually was. The next day, I called Eli. He picked up between classes, his voice warm and easy. Hey, Mom, what's up? I need to talk to you about something, I said. He caught the tone immediately. You okay? I'm fine, but it's about your father. There was a pause. My father. Yes, he's back. His name's Jake Miller now. He reached out through work. Silence again, heavier this time. What does he want? He wants to meet you. Eli exhaled slowly. Do you want that? I hesitated. I think he deserves a chance to tell his side, and you deserve to decide for yourself. He was quiet for a long time, then with a steadiness that made me proud, he said, Okay, I'll meet him. But not for him, for me. When I hung up, I sat in the stillness of my office, Ruth's words echoing again in my head. Don't shrink. This time I wouldn't. The diner on Main Street hadn't changed much in 18 years. Same cracked vinyl booths, same smell of frying bacon and burnt coffee, same hum of the jukebox that hadn't worked right since 1998. That's where Eli wanted to meet him, neutral ground, public, simple. I want to see him, but I don't want it to be emotional, he'd said. I just want the truth. I respected that. He was 18 now, old enough to face his own ghosts. But as we pulled up that afternoon, I still caught myself reaching for his hand like he was a little boy again. You don't have to do this, I said softly. I know, he replied, eyes steady, but I need to. Jake Owen, whatever his name was now, was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 coffees, and that same restless energy I remembered. His hair was shorter, his hands lined with work, but his eyes softened when he saw Eli. He stood. You must be Eli. Eli gave a small nod. Yeah. I'm Jake, he said, his voice quieter than I'd expected. Thanks for meeting me. We sat. The waitress poured us coffee and left without a word. For a moment, the clink of cups was the only sound. Then Eli said, So, you're the guy who ran. Jake's shoulders tensed, but he didn't flinch. Yeah, I was. And I've regretted it every day since. Eli leaned back, arms crossed. Why'd you do it? Jake rubbed his temples, searching for words. Because I was 17 and stupid. Because my dad found out and told me I'd ruined my life. He moved us to Indiana the next morning. I wanted to call, but I didn't even know how to start. Every year that went by, I told myself it was too late. Then one day, 18 years had passed. Eli studied him, expression unreadable. And now, you think showing up makes it right? Jake swallowed hard. No. I just needed to tell you myself that none of it was your fault or your mom's, that I was scared and weak and you both paid for it. He turned to me, then eyes wet. Emily, I am so sorry. I let the silence stretch. The part of me that used to ache for those words wanted to break open, but the woman sitting here now wasn't that girl anymore. You don't get to disappear for nearly 2 decades and think sorry fixes it, I said quietly. But I hear you. He nodded, eyes down. The waitress refilled our coffee. Eli stirred his, watching the steam curl upward. I used to wonder about you, he said finally. When I was little, I'd see dads at Little League or school events and ask Mom why mine wasn't around. She told me you weren't ready, that some people need time to grow up. I think she was right. Jake's voice cracked. I didn't deserve her. Or you. No, Eli said simply. You didn't. But I'm not here for revenge. I just wanted to see the man I got half my DNA from and tell him I turned out fine. He stood then, slipping his hands into his jacket pockets. I have to get back to campus. Finals. Jake blinked, caught off guard. That's it. That's enough, Eli said. He glanced at me, eyes softening. You coming, Mom? I hesitated, then nodded. As we stood to leave, Jake said quietly, Can I see you again, Emily? Just to talk. I turned back, meeting his gaze. Maybe. But I'm not the person you left, Jake. Don't expect her. He gave a slow nod. Understood. The drive home was quiet. Fields stretched wide under a silver sky, the first flakes of snow spinning lazily through the air. Eli finally broke the silence. You okay? I smiled faintly. I think so. You. He shrugged, staring out the window. It's weird. I thought I'd feel angry, but mostly I just feel free, like I closed a door I didn't know was still open. That's good, I said softly. He glanced at me. You forgave him, didn't you? Not yet, I said, but maybe someday. Eli smiled, the kind that looked so much like mine it made my chest ache. Ruth would say, forgiveness is the last step of moving on. I laughed. You quoting your great aunt now? Guess she was smarter than both of us, he said, grinning. That winter life settled back into rhythm. Work holidays, phone calls from Eli between exams. We built new memories to layer over the old scars. But one night in February, I got a letter handwritten, the envelope smudged with snow. Emily, thank you for giving me that chance. Seeing Eli, seeing how strong he is, made me realize what I missed, but also what you built. You didn't just survive, you thrived. I'll never ask for more than that one meeting. I don't deserve to. But I wanted you to know I'm sober now. Been 5 years. I started volunteering at a youth shelter, helping kids who got lost the way I did. Maybe that's how I try to earn a sliver of the grace you gave me. Jake. I folded the letter and set it on Ruth's old nightstand next to her framed photo. You'd like that, I whispered. Redemption. And maybe in some small way she'd been right again. Strength wasn't loud. Sometimes it was just choosing to live with grace instead of anger. Spring came early that year. Eli finished his first year of college with honors and spent the summer home helping repaint the house. The same porch where Ruth used to sit and scold the clouds now looked new again. As we painted, he asked, You ever think about seeing him again? I dipped my brush into the paint. Sometimes, but not for me. For him. Eli nodded thoughtfully. If you do tell him, I hope he's okay. I smiled. I will. When the sun dipped low, we sat on the porch steps, our clothes spattered with white paint. The air smelled like lilacs and cut grass. You know, Eli said, for a woman who got kicked out at 17, you built one hell of a life. I laughed softly. Yeah, guess we both did. He bumped his shoulder against mine. Think Ruth would approve? Absolutely, I said. She'd tell us to quit sitting around and go fix something. We laughed, and for the first time in years, the laughter didn't hide any pain. The morning of Eli's college graduation, the sky over Bloomington glowed that soft gold that only shows up on big days. I stood in the crowd, clutching a small bouquet of sunflowers, Ruth's favorite, trying not to cry as they called his name. Eli Carter, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering with honors. He crossed the stage tall and sure, that easy grin lighting up his face as he shook hands with the dean. The applause thundered, but for me, the world went quiet. I could still see the little boy in overalls who once fixed Ruth's lawnmower with duct tape and a dream. When he turned to wave, I waved back, my throat tight. That was our victory, the one built from every sleepless night, every you can do this. Every breath I'd taken when I didn't think I could. I felt Ruth beside me somehow. Maybe she was in a way. After the ceremony, the courtyard buzzed with laughter and camera flashes. I spotted Eli through the crowd, his cap tipped sideways, surrounded by friends. He turned, caught my eye, and motioned me over. "Mom, over here." When I reached him, he grabbed me in a hug so tight it knocked the wind out of me. "We did it," he said, voice cracking. I laughed through tears. "We sure did, kid." He pulled back, glancing at someone behind me. "Mom, there's someone I invited. I hope that's okay." Before I could ask, I turned, and there he was. Jake. Older, grayer, but unmistakably him. He stood a few feet away, a cautious smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He held a small bouquet, not roses or lilies, but wildflowers, a bit clumsy and imperfect. "Congratulations," he said, his voice steady but soft. "Both of you." Eli looked between us, then said, "Dad, I told Mom it'd be okay if you came." "Dad." The word hit me like a warm breeze, surprising but not unwelcome. Jake nodded to me. He said you might not want to see me. I understand if that's still true. I just wanted to be here not for me, but for him. For a long second I couldn't speak. The anger that used to burn hot in my chest had cooled over the years, hardened into something else. Something like peace. "You showed up," I said finally. "That counts for something." He smiled faintly. "Took me long enough." We ended up sharing a table at the small Italian place near campus. Eli talked a mile a minute about his job offer in Chicago, about his friends, about the projects he wanted to build. Jake listened quietly, pride flickering in his eyes. I sat across from them, half listening, half marveling at how strange and natural it all felt. The boy who left, and the boy who stayed, sharing one table, one laugh, one thread of history I'd spent half my life untangling. When dessert came, Eli excused himself to take a call, leaving Jake and me alone. "I can't make up for what I missed," he said quietly. "But seeing him today, it's more than I deserve." I stirred my coffee. "Maybe. But you still came." Ruth used to say showing up's the first step toward grace. He smiled at that. "She was a smart woman." "The smartest," I said softly. Jake looked down at his hands. "Are you happy, Emily?" I thought about it, really thought. About Ruth's laughter echoing through the house, about the way Eli hugged me goodbye each time he left for school, about the life I'd built brick by brick. "Yes," I said finally, "I am." He nodded slowly. "That's all I ever wanted for you, even if I didn't know how to give it." There was no bitterness left in me, just a kind of gentle acceptance, like the end of a long storm. "Jake," I said, meeting his eyes, "I forgave you a long time ago. I just didn't realize it until now." His eyes glistened. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," I said, smiling faintly. "Just keep doing better." That summer, Eli moved to Chicago for his first engineering job. I helped him unpack his tiny apartment, the kind with brick walls and squeaky floors that remind you of where you started. As I pinned up his curtains, he handed me a small wrapped box. "Open it," he said. Inside was a silver keychain engraved with the words, "For the woman who built everything from nothing." My throat tightened. "Eli." He grinned. "Ruth would have loved it." "She would have told you I don't need gifts," I said, laughing through tears. He hugged me tight. "Then it's not a gift. It's proof." I drove home alone that evening, the highway stretching wide and quiet under the sunset. The old farmhouse stood waiting, the porch light still glowing the way Ruth had left it years ago. I walked inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and looked around the kitchen, the same one where I'd once stood at 17, terrified, clutching a pregnancy test. Now the air smelled of cinnamon and lemon oil. Family photos lined the walls, Ruth with her arm around me, Eli holding his diploma, even one of Jake from graduation day. Not forgiveness exactly, but closure. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat on the porch, watching the fireflies spark to life in the tall grass. The same fields that once felt endless now felt like home. Somewhere a train horn echoed in the distance. I smiled, remembering Ruth's words. "Don't shrink, sugar. Life's too short to make yourself small." She'd been right about that too. I thought about everything that had happened, the heartbreak, the exile, the rebuilding. If someone had told 17-year-old me that I'd end up here whole strong content, I'd have laughed through my tears. But life isn't about what you lose, it's about what you build in the empty spaces. I lifted my cup toward the stars, whispering, "We made it, Ruth." And in the hush of the summer night, I could almost hear her laugh, low and warm, carried on the wind. If you've ever been broken, remember this. You are not the things that left you. You are the things you built afterward. Don't wait for someone to come back and make it right. Build your own ending. And if this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to remember their strength tonight. Because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that heal the loudest.